Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the Big Data Ecosystem. My name is Eric Cavanaugh. I'll be your moderator for today's demo. Folks are going to be hearing from Attunity, a company we've been following for several years now. They're always doing something interesting over there. So we'll hear from Lawrence Schwartz and Jeff Cole to find out what the latest is. So with that, Lawrence, let me hand it over to you.
Hi, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody for taking a few minutes to look at Attunity Replicate and what it can do. So with that, I'll jump into the first slide. So if you step back and think what does Attunity Replicate do and what issues does it address? Well, one common problem that people face is how do you move data into a data warehouse and do that effectively? Today, there's only a small portion of folks that are actually very satisfied with the performance of data warehouse loading. So that becomes a real problem that we hear out in the field and was one of the factors that has driven what we do at Attunity. Next slide. So if you look at the challenges that people have with their data loading today, oftentimes there's a number of things that tend to crop up. First is if you take a look at what are in most people's toolkits, they tend to have some sort of ETL tool. ETL tools have been around for 20 plus years. They include targets, sources, and some sort of ETL process and extract, the transformation of the data and the loading to get the data in. And there's a couple of challenges that people have faced with this type of process in today's environment. If you go to the next step, you can see it's very time and resources intensive to set this up. It often requires a lot of scripting, a lot of planning, a lot of DBA and other resources. So the traditional tools that people are familiar with are not very good to keep up with the amount of data coming in. The number of sources and targets have certainly proliferated over the years. You've had more types of databases, proliferation of data warehouses, from traditional ones that people are very familiar with to newer ones like Vertica, new offerings from Teradata, and EMCs and their work with Pivotal. So the number of different targets have also proliferated over time. Now, in addition to these challenges, doing the management and monitoring of all the data is a real challenge too, because it's often CLI driven, it's hard to control a bigger landscape, and it doesn't give you a good visual of what's happening. Finally, what you also see is that the processes for ETL have been really built around doing things in a batch-oriented way. It's not really geared well towards a real-time process. So that's the challenge that people have with their ETL solutions. Next slide. So the Attunity Replicate architecture, which you're about to see a demo of, really tries to address a number of these issues. First, you have an architecture that is not your traditional ETL, which is, again, that extract, transform, and load, but it's focused more on the E and the L aspects. Get the data out and in as quickly as possible, do that within memory to make it really fast, and make sure that you have all the tools in there to make this very graphical, easy to set up, easy to use, and kind of hides the complexity of the environment. So next slide. So, you know, the steps are very easy to set up. What you'll see in the demo is in order to set up a replication task, it could be as simple as just a few clicks in terms of setting up what you want to do, applying changes, picking your targets and sources, and then just running the process. So all this, the complexity of scripting is kind of under the covers, and you have a very nice, easy-to-use interface. Next slide. What you'll also have a chance to see is there's a very advanced monitoring and control capability. So you can see as the data moves over, is it copying, is everything up to date on the target, are there any issues or is anything falling behind? So all the visualization capabilities that people have grown used to with their data and things like business intelligence, we actually offer that level of visibility within the infrastructure, within that type of environment to see data movement. Next slide. And then what you'll also see, and it's hard to get a sense for this in the demo because it'll be a very short demo, but because everything is done in memory, it's a very high-speed process. We have all sorts of ways of moving the data in memory as well as aggregating the data from a high-volume source and applying the CDC or the change data capture and making that much more efficient and much more geared towards data warehouses. Next slide. And then the other aspect that people enjoy with the solution that you're going to see is it's also a very non-intrusive and lightweight design. It doesn't require installing a lot of software on the source and the target. Makes it very easy to drop into a production environment, get up and running very, very quickly, and keep it maintaining without having to update all the software residing in a system in many places. Next slide. And then another aspect that, again, is I'll talk to, and hard to see in a demo, but one of the things that we also offer with the replication capabilities, going over large area or wide area networks, being able to keep up that data transfer protocol in a very efficient fashion. If you're going from data center to data center, if you're going from data center to a cloud environment, because we're very effective at how we use the file channel, very efficient. It's not just a simple FTP protocol. A lot of complexity goes on to being able to split up tables, merge tables in the stream and move it over, restarting if need be. All the things that you might have to worry about going over long distances is all under the hood with the replication product, whether people use it on-premise to on-premise or on-premise to the cloud. Next slide. And my last slide before I let Jeff take over and give the demo is just to see let you see the number of targets and sources that we have. You'll see this in some of the drop-down menus that Jeff goes through, but you can see we support pretty much any type of the major databases out there, as well as all the major data warehouses that are on the market. So we become a platform that really can work with anyone in anyone's specific environment. And this is great for particularly customers today who have very heterogeneous environments, might have different best-of-breed solutions from different areas, and want this tool that can really work with everything in their environment. And with that, I will hand it over to Jeff to give you a little demonstration of it in action. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Lawrence. Share my screen now.
And you're kind of soft, Jeff, if you could speak up a bit.
Sure. Okay. Should be able to see my screen now.
Yep, looks good.
For this demo, I'm going to be using Oracle as my source, and I just have it running Oracle Database Express running on a virtual PC. And I'm going to be going into a SQL Server database sitting on my desktop, the SQL Server 2008 R2 in this case, and I have an empty database I'm going to push some data into. This is the Replicate console, so it's a web-based console that allows me to both monitor and configure the product. The first thing I do is set up a connection to the database. So I go in here, add a source database, and I choose from one of our supported data types. Quite a few different sources that we support. So in this case, I would select Oracle and enter my connection string information. And then on the target side, I would do the same thing and choose SQL Server in this case for my target. Okay, so I've already done that and set up my Oracle connection here and my target connection here, server target. Okay. After that, I create a task. So a task is just simply copying a set of tables from a source to a target. So the first thing I do is I select what tables I want. A couple of different ways of doing this. I could explicitly select individual tables. Doesn't work real well if I have thousands of tables, so I can use a wild card. So I can include, in this case, the entire schema, but I could have include and exclude selection patterns for this. Okay, so I'm just going to take all of the schema. Okay, a couple things I can set at the task level. So in this case, I'm going to change to and go into a different target schema. In this case, I'm going into the DBO schema. I have some control tables I can turn on, like the history table, to get historical information about latency and throughput and such. On the full load, in this case, I'm going to have Replicate drop and create the tables if they exist. In this case, they don't exist, so Replicate is going to create the tables based on the schema that it finds on the Oracle side. But I may be loading into a data warehouse, and I may do nothing, or maybe just a truncate before loading. If I'm loading into a reporting database that has extra keys assigned and things like that, I don't want to drop. I just want to truncate. I can control how many tables load in parallel. So a lot of that's dependent upon my network architecture and the power of my machines. So not only can I full load, I can also apply the changes. So this is the CDC, applying those inserts, updates, and deletes from the source into the target. I can also replicate DDL changes. So if somebody drops a table on the source, I can drop it on the target or choose not to. Somebody alters a table, adds a column, drops a column, things that typically break a CDC solution. So I can choose to have replicate those changes into my target database. Or in some instances, I may not want to if I'm working in a more of a managed environment. Okay. Store changes is similar to apply changes, but instead of applying them to the target database, I'm going to put them into an audit table or a change table. So I'm going to get the before image and the after image of an update, the delete row, the insert row. I'm going to record those in the change table with some header information, who did it, what time it occurred, transaction ID, operation, things like that. The typical use case for those is an audit database or a business intelligence process, or maybe an ETL product that's going to take those and do something else with those changes. And I can have a task that does a full load, apply changes, and store changes, or any combination. The change processing here, so I can choose to do what we call batch optimize apply or turbo stream. This gives me a way to net the changes together in a specific batch range. So if I have a legacy application that does an insert followed by several updates for the same row, I can change and make that into a net insert into my target database. So I can reduce the load on my target. I can also change that and do like a transactional apply if I had a lot of referential integrity that I had to worry about. So one transaction on the source becomes one transaction on the target. There's quite a few different tuning options I can set in there. I can specify error handling. If I get a database error, I lose connectivity to a target database. Do I try forever? How long do I wait between retries? Things like that. I can also control how apply conflicts are handled. If I get a delete on the source, do I just ignore it if I can't delete something because it doesn't exist on the target? Or do I escalate that, stop the task, notify people, maybe I suspend just that table, things like that. Quite a bit of logging I can turn on inside the replicate engine. So these are all the different components inside the replicate engine. And I can turn those on and off while the product's running. So it makes it very easy to capture a meaningful log that I can send on to support. Okay, with that, I am going to go ahead and fire this up. A couple different ways I can start the product. So I'm going to choose the reload because it's fresh. I don't have a target database. But I might be in a situation where my table's already loaded and I just want to start processing changes from a given point in time. So I can do that. And I can do some metadata-only runs if I'm just doing a metadata creation. So the full load and the CDC are integrated. So I don't have to take my source system offline. Changes can be continuing to happen from the source application. So that if I'm loading a really large table and changes are occurring on that table during the full load, then I'm going to cache those changes. And they show up there in the cache changes if I had any. And once the full load completes, then I'll go ahead and apply those changes to the target. Okay, so my tables are done here. It's pretty fast, so I didn't want to overload my workstation here, so I put about 57,000 records in there. So once it's completed, I get a breakdown, throughput, volume transfer, record count, things like that. I'm going to switch over here and make some changes on my source database, my little tool here. Switch back to change processing mode. So as those changes are coming through, I'm going to get a breakdown. I can either aggregate it all together, or I can break it down and see individual transactions as they come through. Actually, I just did a delete on that 57,000 rows, so there's the 57,000 there. So as things are coming through, I can break it down by table and see the individual things that happen there. I can also do the DDL changes. So like I'm going to modify this table and add a regions table. I'm going to create a new table. So because I used a wildcard in my selection pattern, if I add another table that matches that, it'll get picked up automatically. I didn't have to go back and change the replicate solution. It's going to get picked up and start processing changes for that automatically. And those are all reflected in my target database. Okay. New table. And I think I had to drop table turned on so I can drop that table and alter these, and then those will go away. Okay. Any questions around that part?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop this now. And although Replicate isn't built as a full-blown ETL product, we tend to think more of extract, load, and then transform. But there are some things that you need to do during that load from the source to the target. You may want to filter data. So we have the ability to filter based on the data that's in the rows coming across. You might want to reduce your record sets in your target database, or filter out a certain branch, things like that. On the transforms can take several different forms. The simplest one would be maybe I just don't want certain columns in my output, so I can just remove those from my output list. I might want to change the name of columns. So it might be email in my source, but that's a reserved word in my target. I might want to change the name. So by default, if it's just straight across, I don't have to do anything. You only have to make a change if it's an exception. Another thing might be data type changes. So by default, we're going to select the best data type for the target based on what we find in the source, but I might want to change it. So maybe it's a string in the source, and I want it to be a wide string in the target because I'm supporting Unicode. I also can do functions and operations against this. We use a SQL engine in the background. So most of our transformations are SQL-based, like a case statement, or doing replacing or trimming or changing the case of a value. I can do some data enrichment. Maybe I need to do a source lookup from my source database before I can fill in my target, or maybe a target lookup if I'm going from a different relational database to a new database that has different primary keys and foreign keys, and I need to do a lookup to bring in a value, things like that. I can do some operational things. This is typically used in a data warehouse where I don't do deletes. So if I get a delete on the source, instead of doing a delete on the target, I'm going to update a flag on the row that says this row's been deleted. Sometimes they refer to it as a soft delete, things like that. I can also add columns. So I may want to add a column here, call it last update, give it a date time, data time. And I'm going to fill that in with one of my header columns. I'm going to fill it in with the timestamp of when the change occurred. So now in my target database, I'm going to have an extra column that wasn't in my source called last update. It's going to be a date time, and it's going to be filled in and updated with the last timestamp that the row changed on the source. So it's a way to add extra columns that I may need in my new data warehouse. Okay. Any questions around transformations or anything?
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so there's some things I can set on the server level in addition. You can create a notification or an alert. So in here you can create notifications around operator level events. Somebody stopped and started a task. Performance related. Maybe I want to know if latency is higher than 15 seconds, and I want to be notified when it drops back down below 5. So I can set those thresholds. I can throw out notifications based on errors or warnings, or maybe I need to know if I get more than 10 apply errors on a table. And those notifications can go, if it's running on Windows, it can go to the Windows event log, or it can go out to an SMTP server. We do have a scheduler built into it. So typically this is used to stop all the tasks for a given maintenance window, say. Or if you had a full load only task that you just wanted to run once a day, you would schedule it like that. You can also schedule and stop and start tasks remotely from a command line. So if you had your own scheduling package, you could use that to control this. The file transfer service is for if I'm in a WAN environment and I want to take Replicate and split it into 2 different servers, one on the source that might be thousands of miles away from the target over a slow WAN connection. So I can create what we call a file channel on the source, extract the from the source to the file channel, have the file transfer service move it across for me, and then consume it on the target with another instance of Replicate running over there. And the same thing goes for the logging and error handling. I can set that at the server level, but then override it at the individual task level. Okay, so everything, unless you have a specific question.
Cool. Yeah, I've just got maybe one quick question, and Robin may have a question too, or someone else. Do you find that a lot of your use cases focus on business opportunities that are extremely time sensitive, like you talked about point of service, or point of sale rather, data? Do you find that a lot of your use cases kind of spin out of very serious business needs and then kind of move into more of an analytical world, like you talk about feeding data warehouses and such? Or what is the sort of main area where you get a lot of traction with this stuff?
It's pretty well split. You'll see it a lot for people that want to reduce the load on their source system. So they'll bring Replicate in, get the data out of the source system, put it to a reporting service, a reporting server, or maybe a different data warehouse or something like that, and get the load off the source system. Might be borderline. They can't add any more queries on the source system. We see a lot of it in like a DR type environment, things like that.
Okay, cool. Robin, anyone else, any other questions? No? Looks like you guys are off the hook. Well, this is some pretty interesting stuff. I noticed you also had Hadoop as both a source and a target. How much are you running into Hadoop in production environments with your customers?
I'm running pre-release of version 4 on this demo. So I've been doing some preliminary testing for version 4, but Lawrence can speak to our Hadoop offering.
So what what you've got is a as mentioned, it's kind of got the preview that's coming out. The Hadoop environment support comes out with version 4, which we'll announce in about a month and a half at Strata is our target. So we've had a number of inquiries on Hadoop, and it's kind of built up over the past year or so. For us, it's being able to support it as another source or target. And the typical use cases that people want to do with it are, it's the enterprise data warehouse migration to like a Hadoop data lake, right? How they kind of create one of those repositories. Same type of thing with like doing some offload of the ETL process to Hadoop as another area. And then, if you want to just have, data delivery to kind of a structured system for BI and analytics, that's kind of another place for it. So it's being able to plug in Hadoop into a lot of the existing environments, make use of the, obviously the lower cost, hardware and lower cost systems, and being able to have a way to port that and do that easily. So it's emerging for us. We've had a lot of requests, and then you'll see it officially announced in, the middle of October.
Okay, good stuff. Well, thanks for a very detailed demo, folks. We've been talking to Jeff Cole and Lawrence Schwartz from Attunity. Thanks a lot, guys, as another member of our big data ecosystem. We'll catch up to you next time, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.